Ladysmith.
Thank you. The Sorcerer's Apprentice scene from Fantasia is my mother's favorite, Mr. Speaker. The apprentice arrives, gains access to powerful tools, and tries to harness them to make his work easier. He enchants a broom to carry water. At first, it works. The buckets fill, and the work is done for him. But then, it doesn't stop. The water keeps pouring. He tries to fix it, but he can't undo the spell. In panic, he chops the broom in two, only to create more brooms, more buckets, more water. What began as a clever solution quickly becomes something he cannot control, and the room begins to flood. I've been thinking about that story as we debate Bill C-25, because there are parts in this bill that respond to the concerns I hear in my communities. Conservatives have long called for measures to deter abuses like the longest ballot campaigns. We've called for stronger protections against foreign interference, including in leadership and nomination contests. The changes in Bill C-25 start to address the concerns that we have raised around foreign money influencing Canadian elections, and we support these changes. There are a few amendments we think would be prudent. Ballot boxes should be securely stored when polling stations are closed under triple lock and key. The scope of the expanded offense of making false statements about the results of an election could be clearer. The financial penalties proposed in the bill could be higher. If we were in the early stages of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where the brooms were doing their jobs and the buckets were filling as intended, those changes might be enough to restore Canadians' faith in our institutions. But that is not where we are, Mr. Speaker. In the wake of floor crossings, growing regional alienation, concerns about fairness in how resources are distributed, and a rising sense that decisions are being made behind closed doors for the personal gain of those doing the deciding. For some Canadian, the brooms are everywhere, the buckets are overflowing, and they are rapidly losing confidence. In British Columbia, people notice when elections are called before our polls have even closed. They notice when our tax dollars flow east but don't come back to fund our infrastructure, our hospitals, our communities. And with the recent floor crossings, a growing number of people from across the political spectrum are asking me, why should I bother voting? When people start questioning whether their vote matters, we should all take notice. Because that's not frustration with a single policy or a single party. It's indicative of something deeper. A feeling that their voice no longer carries weight, that the outcome is predetermined elsewhere, that our democracy is not quite functioning as it should. It may be a minority of voices at this point, Mr. Speaker, but once that feeling takes hold, it's very difficult to reverse. People do not disengage all at once. They disengage step by step. First, they question, then they doubt, and eventually, they go quiet, but stop participating altogether. This is not a problem we can regulate away. It's a problem we have to address through how we conduct ourselves as a democracy. In that context, Bill C-25 does some very valuable tinkering around the edges, but it fails to truly meet the moment that we are in. I've spoken to many of these concerned Canadians, Mr. Speaker. The gap between this Parliament and those agnostics is fundamentally one of trust. Trust that decision makers really see their struggles and understand their hopes and dreams. Trust that ministers will do their best to serve Canadians and not enrich themselves along the way. Trust that the person they elected is still who they said they were when they were asking for their vote. If we are, as the Prime Minister has said, living through a moment of rupture, vulnerable to the whims of a hostile America, then this is a time when Canada needs its best ideas to rise to the top. That does not happen by accident, Mr. Speaker. It happens when ideas are tested, challenged, and improved upon through open and rigorous debate. An environment where opposition questions are treated as obstruction is not one where strong ideas can emerge. It is one where the weak ideas go untested. When questions are discouraged, when those who ask them are mocked in this chamber, when scrutiny is dismissed, we materially increase the risk of getting it wrong. It is in the national interest to have an opposition that can ask hard questions. It is nation building to stress test policy proposals, to find gaps, unintended consequences, and missed opportunities. That is how policies are strengthened. That is how we avoid costly mistakes. And that is how we move our country forward, Mr. Speaker. The moment that we accept the frame that our society is divided into two enemy camps, one virtuous and one irredeemably wrong, our society loses something that is mission critical. Probing, questioning, and challenging is something a healthy democracy depends on. And in a moment like this, where we need to find and embrace our best ideas, we should be making more room for opposition and questioning, not less. Because Canada's success depends on every member of this House being able to serve their constituents fully, regardless of which side of the aisle they sit. That is how we truly arrive at the best ideas, not by protecting them from criticism, but by putting them under pressure and seeing what holds. Prime Minister Diefenbaker was known for the sentiment that there is no bad seat in the House of Commons. Every seat in this place carries equal responsibility and legitimacy, regardless of whether its member sits in government or opposition. This week, it is a much-needed reminder that MPs are here to put Canada first, not to seek power for themselves. A government that serves only the ridings it holds weakens the country and undermines our collective purpose. It divides Canadians and pits region against region. And a system that discourages questioning weakens its ability to correct itself. In Canada today, a new Prime Minister has arrived on the scene, much like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. He has gained access to powerful tools, and I will concede that he has harnessed them effectively to achieve the majority government that he insists will make his work easier. He has enchanted a certain demographic, the media, and some floor crossers to wield brooms, fill buckets, and carry water. But there are lessons to be learned from the Sorcerer's Apprentice to ensure the water does not turn into a flood, and to stem the tide of disappointment that Canadians are expressing about behaviour in this place. Any MP who cannot effectively represent their riding from any seat in this House has no business being here. And any government that requires MPs to cross the floor to provide for their ridings is one that undermines the foundations of democracy and should be summarily dispatched at the ballot box. And so I implore the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, recognize these two simple principles. Embrace the value of opposition, especially in this moment. Answer the questions we ask in question period. Stop trying to enchant the brooms and the buckets and be a government that makes space for all Canadians, regardless of the color of their party banner. Because if we do that, Mr. Speaker, the best ideas will rise to the top and we will be able to move this country forward. Work with us to strengthen Bill C-25 in committee. Because if this government does that, Mr. Speaker, then Bill C-25 might help to restore Canadians' faith in our system. It might help bring down the temperature and rebuild trust. But if it does not, we should not be surprised if the brooms and the buckets keep multiplying and the water keeps rising until the floods are upon us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Brandon Souris.
Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the member for that excellent speech. And she and I were just at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee where we were discussing civic resilience, a study that's currently underway there. And so I wonder if you know, in the theme of Bill C-25 and the study that's ongoing at PROC about civic resilience, what does that mean when you've only got one set of voices that's being pushed, one set of ideas that's being pushed? What kind of a message does that send to Canadians who might disagree, and what kind of health does that promote within our Canadian society?
I'm Lady Smith.
I want to thank my colleague for that excellent question. You know, when I knock on doors and I talk to people in my community, there is a sentiment that generally gets all the heads to nod. And that's the idea that Ottawa feels very far away right now from us out in the West Coast on Vancouver Island. That we feel disconnected in a lot of ways from the black box that happens in Ottawa. And I think that there was a framing in committee this morning of the idea that civic resilience is something that bridges that distance between the people and government. And so I think that the lesson that comes out of this is that I would urge this government, I would urge the House to make room for those voices, to spend more time explaining to Canadians what we are doing in this place and why. Because I think that, along with the changes that are proposed in Bill C-25, would go a long way to getting support.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Regina Louvain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for her wonderful speech. I think some of the most biggest questions I've been asked over the last couple of weeks when it comes to, and a couple of years when it comes to democracy is, one, the longest ballot committee. I think that's something that has been, has weighed on people and has made it very difficult for people to cast their ballot and have in a proper way, Mr. Speaker. Like, some ballots have been a meter long, so I would ask my colleague, does this bill address that issue? And also, we can't discuss democracy right now without discussing the floor crossing, and people have become less and less losing faith in democracy when they vote for a person with one particular party and then that person takes that and crosses the floor. I think it is a disservice to the people that sent them to Ottawa. So just a comment on that as well from my colleague. Thank you very much.
Honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
I really want to thank my colleague for that question, you know, because it highlights where we are heading and what we still need to do. The Bill C-25 addresses the issue of the longest ballot in a number of ways. But the truth is that it doesn't matter how many spots are on that ballot or how short it is. If the people who are casting their vote don't have confidence that this House will respect their choice and will enable the member that they elect to be able to serve from any seat in the House and be able to provide for their riding in all circumstances. So that's where I think we have work to do, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to working with the government to restore that confidence in Canada. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable.
The honourable member for Pierre-Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to note that because it's the member from Nanaimo who was speaking, that in the lobbies today, they're serving Nanaimo bars. I'm not sure if that's a coincidence, but beyond that humorous little comment, my question for my colleague is to know, since we're talking about democracy today, I think it's something that's very important. We're all representatives. We all play a role in that democracy, and it's a role that's given to us by the people who vote for us. And recently we've seen a large number of people who've left from the Conservative benches to the Liberal benches, even though that wasn't the mandate that was given to them by their voters. So I'd like to know, what does my colleague think about seeing people cross the floor and go against the mandate given to them by voters?
For Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Merci.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank my colleague for that excellent question.
Very much for the question. It is a difficult thing to see someone who you spoke to and shared lots of good conversations and ideas with decide that they are no longer on your team. That having been said, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the fundamental issues in our democracy today, because we are living in a world where people are trying to create distance that doesn't always exist. We have a lot in common. We need to work together, and we need to have every seat in this House matter. Thank you.
Debate.